What happens when a single dad stops to help a stranded cop in a thunderstorm, only to discover she's the woman who shattered his heart 10 years ago? When Mark Donovan recognized Officer Sarah Collins standing in the pouring rain, he had every reason to drive past. She'd left him at the altar, choosing her dreams over their future. But Mark wasn't that kind of man. That one act of kindness on a rain-soaked highway would reopen wounds he thought had healed, reveal secrets that changed everything. He thought he knew, and prove that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone new. They're about rediscovering someone who was meant to be yours all along. This is a story about second chances, redemption, and a family rebuilt from broken pieces. Before we begin, if you believe in the power of forgiveness and love, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more incredible true stories about hope, healing, and the unexpected paths that lead us home. Now let's begin. I never stopped regretting leaving you. Cop's confession in rain changed a single dad's life forever. The rain came down in sheets, the kind of relentless downpour that turned highways into rivers and made even the most confident drivers grip their steering wheels a little tighter. Mark Donovan squinted through the windshield, his wipers working overtime in a losing battle against the deluge. The road ahead blurred into ribbons of gray and silver headlights from oncoming traffic, creating halos in the wet darkness. He was tired, bone-deep tired. The kind that came from years of being everything to everyone: father, mother, provider, protector. At 38, the lines around his eyes had deepened, etched there by sleepless nights, and the weight of responsibilities he'd never asked for, but had learned to carry anyway. Emma was safe. That was what mattered. His 8-year-old daughter was at his mother's house by now, probably already changed into her favorite pajamas and negotiating for extra cookies before bed. Mark allowed himself a small smile at the thought. Emma had his stubbornness, that was certain. She'd gotten his dark hair too, and those eyes that seemed to see right through people's pretenses. The smile faded as his thoughts drifted, as they often did on long drives, to the women who had left him. First Sarah 10 years ago, just 3 weeks before their wedding. The invitations had already been sent, the venue booked, the flowers ordered, and then she was gone, chasing some dream in California that apparently mattered more than the life they'd planned together. Then Rebecca 3 years ago, his wife, Emma's mother. She'd left for different reasons, or maybe the same ones, just dressed up differently. Another man, a fresh start. Freedom from the mundane reality of marriage to a construction worker who came home with dust on his boots and calluses on his hands. 2 women, 2 abandonments. 2 kinds of heartbreak that had taught Mark Donovan to trust in exactly one thing: himself and his ability to be there for his daughter. That's when he saw the police cruiser. It sat on the shoulder of the highway hazard lights, blinking rhythmically through the rain like a lighthouse warning ships away from rocks. A figure stood beside it, hood up, completely drenched, peering into the open engine compartment with what looked like utter futility. Most drivers would pass by. It wasn't their problem, not their responsibility. Especially not in weather like this, with visibility near zero and the road slick enough to send even the most careful driver into a spin. But Mark wasn't most drivers. He signaled, though there was no one behind him to see it, and eased his truck onto the shoulder about 20 feet behind the cruiser. The rain drummed against his roof like impatient fingers, loud enough to drown out his own thoughts. He grabbed the umbrella from the passenger seat, the good one, the sturdy one that had survived 2 New England winters, and pushed open his door. The cold hit him immediately, rain-soaked wind that cut through his jacket and made him gasp. He popped the umbrella open and hurried toward the figure hunched over the engine. "Need some help, officer." The figure stiffened, then slowly turned around. Time stopped. The umbrella nearly slipped from Mark's grasp as he stared into a face he hadn't seen in almost 10 years. A face that had haunted his dreams for years after she left, then gradually faded into the category of painful memories he'd learned to lock away. Sarah. The name escaped his lips as barely a whisper, lost in the sound of rain pounding against pavement and metal. But she heard it. He saw recognition flash across her features, shocked disbelief, and something else he couldn't quite name. Mark. Her voice was different than he remembered, steadier, more assured, but still with that slight huskiness that used to make his heart race. "Mark Donovan, is that really you?" Water streamed down her face, plastering dark hair against her cheeks, making it possible to tell if there might be tears mixed in with the rain. Her police uniform was soaked through the dark blue fabric clinging to her frame. She looked older, but then again, so did he. 10 years had passed. 10 years of life lived in separate worlds. "What are you doing here?" Mark heard himself ask, automatically moving closer to shield her from the rain, though the gesture felt absurd given how drenched she already was. "Last I heard you were in California." Sarah's laugh held no humor, just a note of bitter irony. "I moved back about 2 years ago, joined the force here after the academy." She gestured helplessly at her cruiser, at the dead engine that had stranded her in this storm. "And now I'm stuck in this monsoon with what appears to be a completely dead battery." The professional part of Mark's brain kicked in, the part that had spent 20 years solving problems on construction sites. "Let me take a look. I've got jumper cables in my truck." He shouldn't be doing this. He should make some excuse, get back in his truck drive, away from this ghost from his past. But his feet carried him to his vehicle anyway, muscle memory overriding the warnings in his head. By the time he returned with the cables, Sarah had closed the hood and was standing beside her cruiser, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. As Mark worked to connect the cables, Sarah spoke. "I can't believe it's you. Of all the people to stop in the middle of this storm." "Yeah, well," Mark didn't look up from the battery connections. "I couldn't just drive past someone in trouble." "No, you couldn't." There was something in her voice, said admiration maybe, or regret. "You never could." They stood in awkward silence as Mark finished the setup. The rain continued its assault, turning the shoulder of the highway into a shallow river that swirled around their feet. Finally, he gestured for her to try the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then roared to life. Sarah's face broke into a genuine smile, the first real expression of joy he'd seen from her. For a moment, she looked exactly like the woman he'd fallen in love with in college, bright, open, full of life. "You always were good with your hands," she said, then seemed to catch the unintended implication, a faint blush coloring her rain-soaked cheeks. Mark felt a strange swirl of emotions in his chest. Old hurt, new curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite name, something that felt dangerously like the flutter of possibility. "Just glad I could help Officer Collins." He kept his tone light, professional, as he disconnected the cables and began coiling them up. "Sarah, please. Just Sarah." He paused, meeting her eyes for the first time since that initial moment of recognition. They were the same green he remembered, like sea glass polished by waves. But there was something different in them now, a depth that hadn't been there before. Pain, maybe, or wisdom earned through suffering. "Just Sarah," he repeated softly. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, even through the rain, something floral and clean. "Mark, why?" She stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I know this is strange. I know we have history, but could we maybe exchange numbers just in case one of us breaks down in a storm again?" He couldn't help the slight edge in his voice. Sarah flinched but didn't back down. "In case we want to talk. Properly. Not in the middle of a highway in a thunderstorm." Mark should say no. He should wish her well, get in his truck, and drive away from this chapter of his life that he'd worked so hard to close. But he heard himself rattling off his cell number, watched as she entered it into her phone with fingers that shook slightly from cold, or nerves he couldn't tell. "Thank you," she said quietly, meeting his eyes again. "For stopping, for helping, for everything. It's what anyone would do." "No." She shook her head firmly. "It's what you would do. That's different." Before he could respond, she climbed back into her cruiser. Through the rain-streaked window, he saw her mouth "thank you" one more time. Then she pulled carefully back onto the highway, her taillights disappearing into the storm. Mark stood there for a long moment, rain soaking through his jacket, jumper cables still in his hands. Then he walked back to his truck on legs that felt strangely unsteady, climbed inside, and sat in the sudden silence, staring at the water streaming down his windshield. What had just happened? The drive to his mother's house passed in a blur. He barely remembered parking, walking up to the door, accepting Emma into his arms when she ran to greet him. "Daddy, Grandma let me have 3 cookies." Did she now? Mark forced a smile, burying his face in his daughter's hair, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. His mother appeared in the doorway, eyebrows raised at his soaked appearance. You look like you went swimming in your clothes. Rough drive. Something like that. Mark set Emma down. Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you home. That night, after he'd tucked Emma into bed and read her 2 chapters of the fantasy novel they were working through together, Mark found himself standing at his bedroom window, staring out at the rain that still fell in steady sheets. His phone sat on the dresser, silent and dark. She wouldn't call. Why would she? They'd exchanged numbers out of politeness, out of the shock of an unexpected reunion. In a few days, the strangeness of the encounter would fade, and they'd both go back to their separate lives, which was exactly what he wanted. Wasn't it 3 days passed? 3 days in which Mark threw himself into work with perhaps more intensity than necessary, taking on extra shifts at the construction site for a new office complex downtown. 3 days of coming home exhausted, helping Emma with her homework, making dinners that were more functional than inspired, and falling into bed with his mind deliberately blank. 3 days of not thinking about green eyes and a rain-soaked highway, and a voice saying words he couldn't quite remember, but felt echoing in his chest nonetheless. On the 4th day, while Mark was helping Emma work through a particularly challenging math problem involving fractions, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he'd entered into his contacts with shaking hands 3 nights ago. Sarah Collins. Emma looked up from her worksheet, curious. Aren't you going to answer it, Daddy? Mark stared at the phone, his heart doing a strange little jump in his chest. He could let it go to voicemail. He could. He answered. Officer Collins. His tone was deliberately teasing a defense mechanism against the nerves suddenly jangling through his system. Is this an emergency? Her laugh came through the line, bright and familiar and achingly nostalgic. Actually, it's more of a thank you. I was wondering if you might like to grab coffee sometime. My treat, for saving me from drowning in that storm. Mark hesitated. Dating hadn't been on his radar since the divorce. The thought of opening himself up to someone, especially someone who had hurt him before, made every self-preservation instinct he possessed start screaming warnings. It's just coffee, Mark. Sarah's voice gentled, as if she could sense his hesitation through the phone line. No pressure, no expectations. I just like to catch up properly, find out who you've become in the last 10 years. Emma was watching him with those 2 perceptive eyes. Who is it, Daddy? Mark covered the phone's microphone. Just someone I used to know, sweetheart. Go ahead and work on problem 5. He uncovered the phone. Saturday afternoon, there's a coffee place downtown, the Copper Bean. Do you know it? I'll find it. He could hear the smile in her voice. 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock, he confirmed, and immediately wondered if he'd just made a terrible mistake. Saturday arrived too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Mark found himself changing shirts 3 times before settling on a simple navy button-down that Emma proclaimed nice but not too fancy. He wasn't sure when his 8-year-old had become a fashion consultant, but he appreciated the guidance nonetheless. Are you going on a date, Daddy? Emma asked as she watched him check his reflection one final time. No, sweetheart. Just meeting an old friend for coffee. You changed your shirt 3 times for an old friend. Mark looked at his daughter. When had she gotten so observant and decided honesty was the best policy? Someone I knew a long time ago, before I met your mom. We're just catching up. Emma seemed to consider this. Okay, but you should bring her home for dinner sometime if she's nice. Grandma says you work too much and need more friends. Does she now? Mark ruffled Emma's hair affectionately. I'll keep that in mind. The Copper Bean was a small cafe that had opened a few years back, all exposed brick and mismatched furniture, and the kind of carefully curated vintage aesthetic that suggested someone had spent a lot of money trying to make the place look casual. Mark arrived 5 minutes early and ordered a black coffee, then settled into a corner table where he could see the door. She walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. Sarah had traded her police uniform for jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her eyes look even more green. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. She looked nervous as she scanned the cafe, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. When she spotted him, her face lit up with a smile that made Mark's carefully constructed defenses wobble just a bit. Hi. She slid into the seat across from him. You found it okay? Been here a few times. Emma likes their hot chocolate. Emma, Sarah's eyebrows rose in question. My daughter, she's 8. Something flickered across Sarah's face, surprise maybe, or something more complex. I didn't know you had a child. Yeah, well, Mark took a sip of his coffee. A lot has happened in 10 years. They ordered Sarah got some complicated latte with caramel and extra foam, and for a few moments they sat in uncomfortable silence, the weight of a decade's worth of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not just for the car thing. She wrapped her hands around her mug as if drawing warmth from it. For how I ended things, for leaving the way I did. Mark had imagined this conversation countless times in the years after she'd left, had practiced all the cutting things he'd say, all the ways he'd make her understand how much she'd hurt him. But now, sitting across from her in this too-hip coffee shop with indie music playing softly in the background, he found he didn't have the energy for anger. Why did you leave? The question came out quieter than he'd intended. I mean, I know you said you weren't ready, but we were planning a wedding. We'd been together for 4 years. If you weren't ready, then... Sarah's eyes glistened with what might have been tears. I was terrified. Of commitment, of staying in one place, of being ordinary. You were so sure about everything about us, about settling down, about building a life here. And I was 24 and stupid, and thought I needed to see the world before I could commit to anything. So you went to California to chase a modeling career that never materialized. Her laugh was self-deprecating. Turned out I was too short for runway, too old to start in an industry full of teenagers, and not quite pretty enough to stand out in a city full of beautiful people. After 3 years of auditions and rejections and barely scraping by on part-time jobs, I had to admit I'd thrown away the best thing in my life for nothing. Mark didn't know what to say to that. Part of him, the part that had spent months drowning his heartbreak in work and whiskey, felt vindicated. But another part, a larger part, just felt sad for both of them. What made you come back? Sarah's hands tightened around her mug. I needed a fresh start, and I wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered. Law enforcement felt like a way to help people to make up for... She stopped abruptly, as if she'd almost said too much. Make up for what? For running away when things got hard. She met his eyes. I'm not that person anymore, Mark. Life has a way of teaching you what matters, usually through pain. He understood that. God, did he understand that. Tell me about it. I got married to a woman named Rebecca about 5 years after you left. Emma's her daughter. The marriage lasted 5 years before Rebecca decided she wanted something different. Someone different. I'm sorry. Sarah's voice was soft with genuine empathy. Being left is... She trailed off, but the unspoken understanding passed between them. They both knew that particular brand of pain. Emma is the best thing that ever came out of that relationship, Mark said firmly. She's smart and funny and sees right through people's nonsense. Gets that from me, I think. Sarah smiled. I'd like to meet her sometime, if that would be okay. The conversation flowed more easily after that. They talked about his construction business, which had grown from just him and his truck to a crew of 5. About her work on the force, the satisfaction of helping people, the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field. About their families, his mother who helped with Emma, her parents who had retired to Florida. They talked about movies and books and the ways their hometown had changed and stayed the same. They laughed about shared memories from college, carefully navigating around the painful end. And slowly, incrementally, Mark felt some of the old hurt begin to ease. But he didn't let his guard down completely. He couldn't. Not with Emma to think about. Not with his own heart that had already been broken too many times. I've thought about you over the years, Sarah admitted, as they stood outside the cafe, coffees long finished, but neither of them quite ready to end the conversation. Wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Mark looked at her thoughtfully. At the time, it felt like the end of the world. But looking back, maybe we both needed to grow up a bit, become the people we were supposed to be. And now, she asked, her eyes searching his face. Now I'm a dad first, he said carefully. Everything else comes second. That is just how it is. Sarah nodded, understanding in her expression. I get that, and I respect it. She pulled out her phone. Would it be okay if we did this again sometime, the coffee thing, I mean? I've really enjoyed talking to you. Mark knew he should say no, Knew he should keep this boundary firm, protect himself and Emma from the possibility of more heartache. But he heard himself saying, yeah, I'd like that. The coffee date turned into dinner the following weekend. Mark's mother agreed to watch Emma with a knowing look that he pretended not to notice. They met at a small Italian place that had been there since they were in college, though it had been renovated several times since then. Over pasta and wine, they talked more deeply. Sarah told him about the loneliness of those California years, about coming home to an empty apartment night after night and wondering if she'd ever made a single right decision. Mark talked about the early years with Emma, the sleepless nights, and the terror of being responsible for another human being, the way divorce had forced him to become both mother and father. You're doing a good job, Sarah said quietly. I can tell just from how you talk about her. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Shane. Mark meant it. She gave me a reason to keep going when everything else fell apart. As the weeks passed, Sarah became a more regular presence in Mark's life. She started texting him throughout the day, silly memes, observations about her work, questions about his. He found himself looking forward to those messages, to the small connection they represented. She would drop by the construction site sometimes during her patrol, bringing coffee and staying for a few minutes of conversation. His crew started teasing him about it, but good-naturedly. Even Jimmy, his foreman, who'd been through 3 divorces and claimed to hate all women on principle, admitted that the cop lady seems all right. But beneath the growing connection, Mark struggled with trust. Late at night after Emma was asleep, he would lie awake thinking about how devastated he'd been when Sarah left, how many years it had taken him to feel whole again. Could he really risk that kind of pain a second time? Would it be fair to Emma to bring someone into their lives who might leave? These questions came to a head one evening when Sarah came over for dinner. It was supposed to be casual, just pizza and a movie, but somehow it had turned into Mark teaching Sarah how to make his mother's famous lasagna, while Emma set the table and chattered about her day at school. The house filled with laughter and the smell of garlic and tomatoes. Sarah and Emma bonded over a shared love of detective novels, Emma delightedly showing Sarah her collection of Nancy Drew books. Mark watched them together, his daughter's face lit up with joy, and felt something in his chest both expand and constrict. This is what it could be like, he thought. This is what a family could feel like. After dinner, they settled on the couch to watch a movie, some animated thing Emma had been begging to see. Emma sat between them, gradually listing to one side until her head was on Sarah's shoulder. Sarah caught Mark's eye over Emma's head and smiled, and in that moment, Mark felt something shift inside him. Maybe he could trust again. Maybe Sarah really had changed. Maybe they could, what? After Emma went to bed, Mark and Sarah sat on the porch swing, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. The stars were out, pinpricks of light in a vast darkness. They swung gently, the chains creaking in a rhythm that was almost meditative. I should tell you something, Sarah said, finally her voice quiet but steady. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Mark's stomach tightened. Here it comes, he thought. The reason she really left. The secret that would make sense of everything. I've never stopped regretting what I did to you. She turned to face her, her eyes catching the moonlight. Not for a single day in the last 10 years. At first, I tried to tell myself I'd made the right choice, that I needed to explore and grow, and all those other justifications we give ourselves when we do selfish things. But nothing I found out there compared to what I left behind. Sarah, let me finish, please. She took a shaky breath. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I also know that finding you again, even by accident in the middle of a storm, feels like the universe giving me an opportunity I never thought I'd get. The chance to show you that I'm not that scared girl anymore. That I understand what I gave up, and She stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. You what? Mark asked softly. I've fallen in love with you again, she whispered. Or maybe I never stopped. I don't know. All I know is that these last few weeks with you and Emma have been the happiest I've been in years. And I know that's not fair to say, and I know it puts pressure on you, but I needed you to know the truth. Mark was silent for a long moment, processing her words. His heart was pounding, his mind racing through all the reasons why this was a bad idea, all the ways it could go wrong, but also all the ways it could go right. I can't go back to who I was then, he finally said. Too much has happened. I'm not that trusting kid who believed everything would work out if we just loved each other enough. Sarah nodded, starting to withdraw emotionally, preparing herself for rejection. But Mark continued, reaching for her hand. Maybe we could see who we might be now. Take it slow, for Emma's sake and mine. Sarah's eyes glistened in the moonlight. Slow. I can do slow. I can do whatever you need. I need honesty, Mark said. No secrets. No running when things get hard. I need to know that if we do this, you're all in. Because Emma will get attached, and if you leave, I won't leave. Sarah's voice was fierce. Not this time. Not ever again if you'll have me. They sat there on the porch swing for a long time, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. It wasn't a promise of forever. It wasn't even a promise of tomorrow. But it was a start, a beginning built on truth and scars, and the tentative hope that broken things could sometimes be mended into something even stronger than before. Inside the house, Emma slept peacefully, unaware that her father had just taken the first real risk on love since her mother had left. Unaware that their family of two might become something more. But she would find out soon enough. And when she did, when Sarah became a regular fixture in their lives, teaching her self-defense moves and reading her detective novels and braiding her hair in the mornings before school, Emma would accept it with the easy grace of childhood. Because children know in a way adults sometimes forget, that families aren't always made of blood and shared DNA. Sometimes they're made of choices, of people who show up, who stay even when things get hard. Sarah was showing up. The question was whether she would stay. Only time would tell. But as Mark walked Sarah to her car that night, as they stood in the driveway under the starlight and shared their first tentative kiss in 10 years, he thought maybe, just maybe, he was ready to find out. The kiss was soft, questioning, full of all the things they couldn't quite say out loud. When they pulled apart, Sarah was smiling through tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping that night, for giving me this chance." "Thank you for calling," Mark replied, "for being brave enough to reach out." As he watched her taillights disappear down the street, Mark felt something he hadn't felt in years. Something that felt dangerously like hope. He went inside, checked on Emma one more time. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm hanging off the side, clutching a stuffed rabbit that was missing an ear, and then stood at his bedroom window looking out at the night. His phone buzzed with a text. From Sarah. "Made it home safe. Thank you for tonight, for everything. Sweet dreams, Mark." He typed back, "Sweet dreams, Sarah." And for the first time in 3 years, Mark Donovan went to sleep with a smile on his face, thinking not about what he'd lost, but about what he might find. The first few weeks of their renewed relationship unfolded with a careful tenderness, like two people learning to trust their weight on ice they weren't sure would hold. Sarah became a fixture in their lives gradually. Sunday brunches at Mark's house, movie nights, where Emma would fall asleep between them on the couch, weekend hikes through the state park, where Emma would run ahead on the trails while Mark and Sarah walked hand in hand behind her. Emma took to Sarah with an enthusiasm that both warmed and worried Mark. His daughter had never known her mother to be particularly present. Rebecca had always been distant, more interested in her phone and her friends than in Emma's elaborate stories about school or her careful drawings of fantastical creatures. But Sarah listened, really listened. She asked follow-up questions and remembered details and showed up to Emma's science fair with genuine excitement. "Look, Sarah, my volcano actually erupted this time." Emma's face had been radiant with pride, completely unbothered by the fact that her volcano had also splattered baking soda and food coloring all over the gym floor. Sarah had laughed, helped clean up the mess, and taken a dozen photos on her phone. Later, Mark found her setting one as her lock screen, Emma with her volcano grinning ear to ear. "Is this okay?" Sarah had asked nervously. "I don't want to overstep. I know I'm not her mother." "You're you," Mark had replied simply, "and that's more than enough." But beneath the surface of these small domestic moments, Mark sensed something troubling Sarah. She would get distant, sometimes her mind clearly elsewhere. She'd check her phone obsessively during dinner, her brow furrowed with worry. There were nights when she'd cancel plans last minute with vague explanations about work emergencies. Mark tried to be understanding. She was a cop. Emergencies happened. But a small voice in the back of his mind, the voice that sounded a lot like old hurt and learned wariness, whispered, "She's pulling away. She's going to leave again." He was sitting at a red light one afternoon heading home from the construction site when he saw her. Rebecca, his ex-wife, stood on the corner outside a coffee shop looking at her phone. Mark hadn't seen her in months. She'd moved across town after the divorce and had been sporadic at best about visiting Emma. On impulse, he rolled down his window. Rebecca, she looked up, surprise flickering across her face, then something that might have been calculation. She walked over to his truck, leaning against the passenger window. She looked good, she always had. Carefully maintained highlights, designer jeans, makeup applied with precision. Mark, it's been a while. How have you been? Good, great, actually. I'm dating someone new. Really good guy. She said it like it was an accomplishment, like she expected him to be impressed or jealous. That's good. I'm happy for you. And he meant it. Rebecca's happiness meant she was less likely to disrupt Emma's life with her unpredictability. I heard you're seeing someone too. Rebecca's tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp. Emma mentioned her, a cop. Yeah, Sarah, it's new. Mark wasn't sure why he felt the need to downplay it. Rebecca's smile was strange. Sarah Collins. Mark's stomach dropped. You know her. Tall, dark hair, green eyes. Rebecca's smile widened at Mark's expression. Yeah, I know her. She gave me a speeding ticket last month, 50 in a school zone. Really aggressive about it too, like she had something to prove. The light turned green. Someone honked behind him. I should go, Mark said. Sure, tell Emma I'll pick her up this Saturday. I want to spend some real time with her. Rebecca stepped back from the truck. Oh, and Mark's small world, isn't it? As Mark drove away, his hands were tight on the steering wheel. It shouldn't matter that Sarah had given Rebecca a ticket. That was her job. Rebecca had been speeding in a school zone, for God's sake. But the fact that Sarah hadn't mentioned it. That night after Emma was in bed, Mark called Sarah. She answered on the third ring, sounding tired. Hey, everything okay? Did you give Rebecca a speeding ticket? Silence on the other end of the line. Then yes, about a month ago. She was doing 50 in a school zone. I didn't realize she was your ex until I saw the name on her license. Why didn't you tell me? Because it had nothing to do with you or us. Sarah's voice was firm. I was doing my job. She was endangering children. What was I supposed to do? Give her a pass because she happened to be your ex-wife? Mark knew she was right. Logically, he knew. But the seed of doubt had been planted. You're right. I'm sorry. It just felt weird hearing it from her instead of you. Mark, Sarah's voice softened. If we're going to make this work, you have to trust me. I know I broke that trust once. I know I have to earn it back. But I can't spend our entire relationship waiting for you to find a reason to doubt me. I know, you're right. I'm sorry. They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, but the conversation left Mark unsettled. Not because Sarah had done anything wrong, but because Rebecca's reappearance had stirred up old insecurities he thought he'd dealt with. And Rebecca, it seemed, was just getting started. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca began inserting herself back into Emma's life with sudden intensity. She started calling Mark to schedule activities with Emma, last-minute trips to the zoo, spontaneous shopping trips, weekend sleepovers at her new apartment. It would have been welcome if it felt genuine, but something about the timing felt calculated. Rebecca wants to take me to the water park this Saturday, Emma announced one evening. Can I go? Mark glanced at the calendar on the fridge. That's the day we were going to have lunch with Sarah, remember? Emma's face fell. Oh, I forgot. It's okay, sweetheart. We can reschedule with Sarah. But when he called Sarah to explain, he could hear the hurt in her voice, carefully masked, but there nonetheless. Of course, Emma should spend time with her mother. Sarah. It's fine, Mark. Really, I understand. But it wasn't fine. It was the third time in as many weeks that plans with Sarah had been disrupted by Rebecca's sudden maternal enthusiasm. The pattern continued. Rebecca would schedule activities that conflicted with things Mark had planned with Sarah. She'd call Emma during their movie nights, keeping her on the phone for hours. She'd make comments to Emma, carefully worded, age-appropriate, but pointed nonetheless about how relationships could be temporary and how important it was to remember who your real family was. Emma, caught in the middle, started to seem anxious. She'd ask Mark questions like, Sarah isn't going away, is she? And if you and Sarah get married, will Mom be sad? Mark tried to navigate it all with patience, but he could feel the strain building. Sarah was trying to be understanding, but he could see it wearing on her. The distance between them grew incrementally, not a chasm, but a widening crack that neither of them seemed to know how to bridge. Meanwhile, Sarah's work situation was becoming increasingly consuming. She'd been promoted to detective and was working on what she would only describe as a sensitive case. She'd come to dinner distracted, checking her phone constantly. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. She lost weight. And when Mark asked if everything was okay, she'd force a smile and say, "Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." But Mark was worried, not just about the case, but about Sarah herself. She seemed to be carrying a weight that went beyond professional stress. Sometimes he'd catch her looking at Emma with an expression of such profound sadness that it made his heart ache. "Sarah talked to me," he said one night after Emma had gone to bed. They were sitting on his couch, Sarah curled against his side, but feeling somehow distant despite the physical closeness. "Something's going on, more than just work." She was quiet for so long, he thought she might not answer. Then, "I'm working on a child abuse case. A little girl 8 years old, same age as Emma." Mark's arm tightened around her. "That must be hard." "Her name is Lily. She lives with her stepfather. Mother died 2 years ago. Neighbors reported concerns, but we haven't been able to build a solid enough case. The stepfather is—" Sarah's voice hardened. "He's connected, rich. The Henderson family owns half the commercial real estate in this county. His lawyer is already making noise about harassment and false accusations." "Can I do anything?" Sarah shook her head. "Just be patient with me. I know I've been distant. I know I keep canceling plans and showing up distracted. But this case, Mark, I can't let it go. I can't let another child—" She stopped abruptly. "Another child?" Mark asked gently. Sarah pulled away, standing up and walking to the window. For a long moment, she just stared out at the darkness, her arms wrapped around herself. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. "Something I should have told you weeks ago, months ago maybe." Mark's heart rate picked up. Here it was, the other shoe finally dropping. "When I was in California, I got pregnant." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "It wasn't planned. The father was a photographer I'd been seeing casually. He made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with a child. So I was on my own." Mark couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was hearing. "I was 5 months along when I had a miscarriage. Complications. They told me there was nothing I could have done differently, but I—" Her voice broke. "I lost my baby Mark, a little boy, and I had no one. No family out there, no real friends. Just me in a hospital room holding this tiny person who would never take a breath." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, her shoulders shaking with sobs she'd apparently been holding back for years. Mark went to her, pulled her into his arms, held her while she cried. Finally, so much made sense. The career change, the return home, the intensity with which she'd thrown herself into police work, particularly cases involving children. "That's why you came back," he said softly. "That's why you became a cop." She nodded against his chest. "I couldn't save my own child, but maybe I could save others, protect them, make sure what happened to me being alone and scared and helpless didn't happen to anyone else." "Oh, Sarah." Mark kissed the top of her head, his own eyes burning with tears. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." They stood there for a long time holding each other, while Sarah's years of grief and guilt finally found release. Eventually, they moved back to the couch. Sarah curled into Mark's side, exhausted from crying. "This case with Lily," she said quietly, "it's all tangled up with my own stuff. I see her and I see the child I lost. I see her in danger and I feel like if I can just save her, maybe I can make peace with what happened to me." "That's a lot of weight to carry," Mark said gently. "I know, my therapist says I'm too emotionally invested, that I need to step back and let someone else handle it. But I can't, Mark. I can't walk away from her." Mark understood obsession, understood the way past pain could drive present actions, but he also understood that Sarah was drowning, and he didn't know how to save her without drowning himself. "What can I do?" he asked. "Just don't give up on me." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen but clear with desperate honesty. "I know I'm a mess right now. I know I'm not the partner you deserve. But I'm trying. I'm really trying." "I'm not giving up on you," Mark promised. And he meant it. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Mark was at the construction site reviewing blueprints with his foreman when his phone rang. Emma's school. Mr. Donovan, this is Principal Martinez. I need you to come to the school immediately. Emma's fine, but there's been a situation. Mark's blood ran cold. What kind of situation? I'd rather discuss it in person. Please come as soon as you can. He was in his truck and speeding toward the school within minutes, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. An accident. A fight had Emma gotten hurt. When he arrived, he was directed to the principal's office. Emma was sitting in a chair clutching her backpack, her face tear-stained but otherwise appearing unharmed. Relief flooded through him. Emma, sweetheart, are you okay? She nodded, but her lower lip was trembling. Principal Martinez gestured for Mark to take a seat. Mr. Donovan, there's no easy way to say this. Emma wasn't at school today. But I dropped her off this morning. She was marked present for homeroom, but when we did attendance for second period, she was gone. We searched the building, checked security footage. We were about to call the police when Officer Collins brought her back. Sarah. Mark's mind reeled. Where was she? Before the principal could answer, Sarah appeared in the doorway. She was in uniform, her expression grim but relieved. Behind her stood a man Mark had never seen before, late 50s, expensive suit, the look of someone used to being the most important person in any room. Mark, Sarah's voice was professional but strained. Emma is safe. That's the most important thing. Where was she, sir? Mark repeated, his voice rising. Sarah glanced at the man in the expensive suit, then back at Mark. She was at the Henderson estate, Richard Henderson's property. The name clicked. The child abuse case. The connected family Sarah had been investigating. What the hell was my daughter doing there? Mr. Henderson has been asking the same question, the principal said nervously. He's being very understanding about the whole situation. Understanding? Sarah's voice was sharp. Your daughter was taken from school property by his stepson without authorization and brought to a private residence. There's nothing understanding about this situation. Richard Henderson stepped forward, his smile practiced and condescending. Now, Officer Collins, let's not be dramatic. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. My stepson thought Emma was the friend his daughter had mentioned wanting to have over. He was trying to do something nice. By removing a child from school without parental permission or school authorization. Sarah's hand was on her belt close to her cuffs. That's called kidnapping, Mr. Henderson. That's a very serious accusation to make without evidence, officer. Henderson's smile never wavered, especially given your department's recent enthusiasm in investigating my family. One might think you have a vendetta. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Mark looked between Sarah and Henderson, trying to piece together what was happening. Can someone please explain to me what's going on? He demanded. Sarah turned to him, her professional mask cracking slightly. Emma was approached by a man, Mr. Henderson's 19-year-old stepson, who told her he was a friend of mine and that I'd asked him to pick her up for a special surprise. She went with him. Mark felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Emma, why would you go with a stranger? He wasn't a stranger, Daddy. Emma's voice was small. He said he knew Sarah. He knew things about her, about you, about our family. He seemed nice. He manipulated her, Sarah said flatly. Used information he shouldn't have had to gain her trust. Information that's readily available on social media, Henderson interjected smoothly. My stepson meant no harm. He simply made a mistake. A mistake that could have ended very badly, Sarah shot back. Henderson's smile finally faded. Are you charging him with something, Officer Collins? Sarah looked like she wanted to say yes. Every muscle in her body was tense with the desire to arrest this man and his stepson and throw away the key. But Mark saw the moment she realized she couldn't not, without evidence, not with Henderson's lawyers already circling. Not at this time, she said through gritted teeth, but this incident will be fully investigated and documented. I'm sure it will. Henderson's smile returned. As will the pattern of harassment my family has experienced from you and your department. My lawyers will be very interested in this latest development. He turned to Mark. Mr. Donovan, I sincerely apologize for the distress this has caused you and your daughter. I assure you my stepson will be disciplined for his poor judgment. Then he was gone, leaving behind a suffocating silence. The principal cleared her throat. Given the circumstances, I think it's best if Emma goes home for the day. We'll, of course, be reviewing our security procedures. Mark barely heard her. He was looking at Emma, at his daughter, who had been in danger because of Sarah's work, Sarah's case, Sarah's obsession. Come on, sweetheart. He stood holding out his hand to Emma. Let's go home. Mark, Sarah started. Not now. He couldn't look at her. If he looked at her, he might say something he'd regret, or worse, something he wouldn't regret. They left the school in silence. Emma fell asleep in the truck on the drive home, exhausted from the fear and confusion. Mark carried her inside, tucked her into bed even though it was only 3 in the afternoon, and stood in her doorway watching her sleep. His phone buzzed. Sarah, we need to talk. Not tonight, Emma needs me tonight. Mark, please, I know you're angry. Angry, Mark typed back. My daughter was kidnapped as a warning to you, because of your case, because you couldn't let it go. I'm trying to save a child. What about my child who's protecting her? His phone rang. Mark declined the call. It rang again. He turned it off. That night after Emma woke up and they'd had dinner pizza, her favorite, and he'd reassured her a dozen times that she was safe and loved and none of this was her fault, Mark sat on his porch in the darkness and let himself feel the full weight of what had happened. Sarah had brought danger into their lives. Not intentionally, maybe. But her past, her pain, her unresolved grief over the child she'd lost, it had all led to his daughter being put at risk. He wanted to be understanding. God, he wanted to be the kind of man who could support Sarah through her trauma and her work and all the complicated pieces that made her who she was. But he was Emma's father first. And that meant protecting her, even if it meant protecting her from someone he was falling in love with. His phone, which he'd turned back on to make sure Emma's school could reach him if needed, buzzed with a text from his mother. Emma called me. She told me what happened. I'm coming over. 20 minutes later, his mother was sitting next to him on the porch, a cup of tea in her hands, waiting for him to talk. I don't know what to do, Mark said finally. Tell me what happened. All of it. So he did. He told her about Sarah, about their reconnection, about Emma's attachment to her, about the child abuse case and Sarah's lost baby and the obsession that was consuming her. About today, about Emma being taken, about the cold calculation in Richard Henderson's eyes. His mother listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. That poor girl, she finally said. Emma, yeah, she was terrified. Sarah, his mother looked at him. Losing a child like that all alone in a strange city. My God, Mark. Mark felt a flash of frustration. Mom, my daughter was kidnapped today. As a warning to Sarah because she's trying to save another little girl from a monster. His mother set down her tea. I'm not saying what happened wasn't serious, it was. But I am saying that running away at the first sign of real adversity isn't how you build something lasting. This isn't the first sign of adversity, Mark argued. She left me at the altar 10 years ago. She's been distant and distracted for weeks, and now Emma's been put in danger because of her work. Emma was put in danger because a powerful man wanted to intimidate a police officer who was getting too close to the truth. His mother's voice was firm. Don't blame Sarah for that. Blame the man who orchestrated it. Mark wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. I'm not saying you have to stay with her, his mother continued. If you don't love her, if you don't think this relationship has a future, then end it. But don't end it because you're scared. Don't end it because it's easier to run than to fight. I'm not running. I'm protecting my daughter. From what? From someone who cares about her, from someone who's trying to protect other children. Mark, honey, I know you've been hurt. I know Rebecca did a number on you. And what Sarah did 10 years ago, leaving you like that, it was awful. But people change, people grow. And sometimes the people who hurt us are the ones fighting the hardest not to hurt anyone else. She stood, kissed the top of his head. Think about it. Really think about it. And ask yourself, what are you teaching Emma to run when things get hard, or to fight for the people and things that matter? After she left, Mark sat on the porch for hours, turning his mother's words over in his mind. What was he teaching Emma? The next morning, Emma came down to breakfast looking worried. Is Sarah okay? She's not in trouble, is she? Why would she be in trouble? Because of what happened? Because that man took me? Emma picked at her cereal. She saved me, Daddy. She found me and brought me home. She was really scared. I could tell. You could. Her hands were shaking when she checked if I was hurt, and her voice was all funny, like she was trying not to cry. Emma looked up at him with those two perceptive eyes. Are you mad at her? Mark sat down across from his daughter. I was scared yesterday, really scared. And sometimes when we're scared, we get angry at the people trying to help because it's easier than being angry at the people who actually did something wrong. So you're not mad at Sarah? No, sweetheart, I'm not mad at Sarah. Good. Emma returned to her cereal. Can she come to my birthday party next week? I want her to meet Grandma Martha and Uncle Jim. We'll see. But Emma wasn't done. Daddy, the little girl Sarah's trying to help. Is she going to be okay? Mark's throat tightened. I don't know, sweetheart. Sarah should help her, even if it's hard, even if bad people try to stop her. Emma spoke with the simple certainty of childhood. That's what heroes do. Out of the mouths of babes, Mark called Sarah that afternoon. She answered on the first ring. Mark, can you come over tonight after Emma's asleep? We need to talk. Okay. Her voice was small, braced for rejection. When Sarah arrived that evening, she looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. Have you slept? Mark asked as he let her in. Not really. Sarah followed him to the couch but didn't sit. Mark, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but I need you to know. Sit down, Sir. Mark said gently, please. She sat. He sat next to her, not quite touching, but close. Tell me about the case, he said. All of it. So she did. She told him about Lily Henderson, 8 years old, bright and sweet, and slowly being destroyed by a stepfather who saw her as an inconvenience at best, a target for his cruelty at worst. About the carefully hidden bruises, the behavioral changes at school, the neighbors who'd heard things but were too afraid of the Henderson family to formally come forward. She told him about the months of investigation, the walls they kept hitting the evidence that somehow disappeared or became inadmissible. About Richard Henderson's lawyers who threatened lawsuits and filed complaints and made it nearly impossible for the police to do their jobs. His stepson taking Emma, Sarah said, her voice breaking. That was a message. Back off or the people you care about will pay the price. What are you going to do? Sarah looked at him, surprised. What am I going to do? Oh, yeah, about the case, about Lily. I don't know. My captain wants me to step back, let someone else handle it. Henderson's lawyers are circling, and with what happened with Emma, they're claiming I'm emotionally compromised and potentially dangerous. Are you emotionally compromised? Sarah laughed bitterly. Yeah, I am. This case, it's all tangled up with my own grief, my own guilt. My therapist says I'm trying to save Lily as a way of saving the child I lost, that I can't separate the two. Okay, Mark said. So you're emotionally compromised. Does that mean you're wrong about Lily being in danger? No, God, no. That little girl is suffering and we're the only ones who can help her. Then keep fighting, Mark said simply. Sarah stared at him. Mark, a man threatened your daughter because of this case. How can you tell me to keep fighting? Because Emma told me I should. He managed a small smile. She said you're a hero, that heroes don't give up even when it's hard, even when bad people try to stop them. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I'm drowning and pulling you and Emma down with me. Mark reached for her hand. Then let me help you stay afloat. Let us help you. I can't ask that of you. You're not asking, I'm offering. He squeezed her hand. But Sarah, I need complete honesty from here on out. No more secrets. No more shutting me out because you think you're protecting me. If we're going to do this, really do this, I need to know what's happening. Even the scary stuff. Especially the scary stuff. Even if it puts you and Emma at risk. Henderson already showed his hand. He's a bully who thinks he can intimidate people into silence. But here's the thing about bullies, they're usually cowards underneath. And they're a lot less effective when people stand together instead of letting themselves be isolated and afraid. Sarah pulled him into a fierce embrace, sobbing against his shoulder. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve this chance. Maybe not, Mark said, wrapping his arms around her. But you've got it anyway, so don't waste it. They held each other for a long time, both of them shaking with the relief of not having to face the darkness alone. Finally, Sarah pulled back. I need to tell you something else about Rebecca. Mark's stomach tightened. What about her? She knows about us. She knows we dated in college. She knows you were my fiancé before we broke up. How would she know that? Because we knew each other. In California. Not well, we weren't friends or anything, but we moved in the same circles for a while. She was trying to break into modeling too, though she had even less luck than I did. Mark felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. Rebecca knew me through you. Not exactly. I don't think she knew who you were when you first met, but I think when she realized the connection, it became a thing for her. A way to prove she could have what I'd given up. That's it, Danny. Sarah's voice was sad. I broke your heart and threw away our future. She knew that, and I think in her mind marrying you was a way of proving she was better than me, that she could hold on to what I couldn't. Mark remembered the early days with Rebecca, how she'd seemed so interested in his past and his previous relationships. How she'd ask questions about Sarah, claimed she was just curious about the woman who'd left him. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wasn't sure. I didn't have proof, just a gut feeling. And I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, seeing connections that weren't there because I felt guilty about what I'd done to you. But now I think her sudden interest in being a present mother, her perfectly timed conflicts with our plans, her comments to Emma about relationships being temporary, I think she's trying to drive a wedge between us. Sarah met his eyes. I think she still sees you as a competition she needs to win. Mark sat back processing this. His marriage to Rebecca had never felt quite real, he realized. She'd been going through the motions of being a wife, a mother, but her heart had never fully been in it. And when someone better came along, or rather, when she got bored with the game, she'd left without looking back. Until Sarah reappeared. Until the competition became interesting again. What do I do? He asked. Set boundaries, Sarah said firmly. Make it clear to her that she can't use Emma as a weapon, that you and Emma and I were a family now, or we're trying to be, and she can either be a positive presence in Emma's life, or she can step back, but she can't keep playing these games. She won't like that. Probably not. But Emma is caught in the middle. She needs stability, consistency, not this tug of war between the people who are supposed to love her. She was right. Mark had been so focused on trying to keep everyone happy, trying to make up for Rebecca's absence by being accommodating, that he'd lost sight of what Emma actually needed. Will you be there? He asked. When I talked to Rebecca, Sarah looked surprised. You want me there? Yeah, I do, because you're right. We're trying to be a family. And families face hard conversations together. That Saturday was Emma's 9th birthday party. Mark had planned a small celebration, just family and a few of Emma's friends from school. His mother came early to help set up, bringing enough food to feed twice as many people. Uncle Jim arrived with his new girlfriend and a ridiculously large stuffed unicorn that made Emma squeal with delight. Sarah came bearing a carefully wrapped present and a nervousness that made Mark want to wrap her in his arms and tell her she had nothing to worry about. Is this okay? She whispered as they watched Emma tear into presents. Me being here, it's more than okay. Mark squeezed her hand. It's perfect. Emma loved Sarah's gift, a junior detective kit complete with a magnifying glass fingerprint powder and a notebook for clues. She immediately put on the detective hat that came with it and started investigating the party, much to everyone's amusement. This was a really thoughtful gift, Mark's mother said to Sarah. You really know our girl. Sarah blushed with pleasure. She's special. It's easy to find things she'd love. That's when Rebecca arrived. She'd texted that morning to say she was coming despite not having RSVP'd. Mark had been expecting her, but the timing still made his stomach clench. She was dressed impeccably, as always, carrying a gift bag from an expensive toy store and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Happy birthday, baby. She swept Emma into a hug, then held her at arm's length. Look at you, 9 years old. When did you get so grown up? Emma squirmed. Thanks, Mom. Rebecca's eyes found Sarah across the backyard. Oh, Officer Collins, what a surprise to see you here. Rebecca, Sarah's voice was carefully neutral, though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Emma talks about you quite a bit. Rebecca's tone suggested this was not necessarily a positive thing. Mark intervened. Rebecca, can I talk to you for a minute inside? She followed him into the house, Sarah trailing behind at Mark's gesture. They stood in the kitchen, the sounds of the party drifting through the screen door. What's this about? Rebecca asked, though her eyes on Sarah suggested she already knew. We need to set some boundaries, Mark said. About Emma, about how we're all going to move forward. Rebecca's laugh was sharp. Let me guess, she put you up to this. I'm making my own decisions, Rebecca, like I should have been doing all along and instead of trying to keep everyone happy. Mark kept his voice calm but firm. You're Emma's mother. You'll always be her mother. But you can't keep using her as a way to disrupt my life or my relationship with Sarah. Using her, I'm her mother, I have every right. To see her, yes. To be part of her life, absolutely. But not to schedule activities specifically to conflict with our plans. Not to make comments about how temporary relationships are. Not to play games, and Rebecca's face flushed. I don't know what you think. I know you knew Sarah in California, Mark interrupted. I know you knew about our history when we met. And I know that our entire marriage was at least in part about you trying to prove something. Rebecca went very still. That's ridiculous. Is it? Sarah spoke for the first time. Because I remember you, Rebecca. I remember the way you used to watch couples in LA like you were studying them. The way you collected information about people like weapons you might need someday. You don't know anything about me. I know you married a man whose biggest heartbreak came from me, Sarah said quietly. And I know that's not a coincidence. Rebecca's mask finally cracked. You threw him away like he was nothing. And you know what? He mourned you for years. Even after he married me, there was always this part of him that I could never reach because you'd broken it. I know, Sarah said softly, and I'm sorry. Not for coming back, not for loving him now, but for the pain I caused him then. For the damage that still affected you and your marriage. Do you think I want your apology? Rebecca's voice was thick with tears. Do you think that makes any of this better? No. Sarah shook her head. But maybe we can agree that Emma deserves better than being caught in the middle of all this old pain and resentment. Rebecca looked at Mark. Really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. You're happy with her. I can see it. You look at her the way you never looked at me. Mark wanted to deny it to spare her feelings, but he owed her honesty at least. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I did try to love you the way you deserved. I know. She wiped her eyes, careful of her makeup. I just thought if I could make you love me like that, it would prove something. That I was worth choosing. That I was better than... She stopped glancing at Sarah. You don't need to prove anything, Mark said gently. You're Emma's mother. That's enough. You don't have to compete with Sarah or anyone else. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened her shoulders and armor, sliding back into place. Fine, boundaries. I get it. I'll coordinate with you before scheduling things with Emma. I'll stop making comments. I'll try to be better. That's all we're asking, Mark said. Rebecca picked up her purse, then paused. For what it's worth, Emma does seem happy when she talks about you both. I can be a lot of things, but I'm not so petty that I want my daughter to be unhappy just to prove a point. She left through the front door, skipping the rest of the party. Mark watched her go, feeling a complicated mix of relief and sadness. Sarah touched his arm. That was really hard. Yeah, Mark turned to her, pulling her close. But necessary, and I couldn't have done it without you. We make a good team. Yeah, he said, kissing her forehead. We do. They returned to the party where Emma was showing her detective kit to her friends. She looked up when they emerged, her eyes finding Mark's with a question. He gave her a thumbs up. She grinned and returned to her investigation. Later, after the party had wound down and the last guest had left, Emma sat between Mark and Sarah on the porch swing, contentedly working on a puzzle while the adults talked quietly. Best birthday ever, Emma announced. Yeah, Mark smiled. Even with Mom leaving early. She looks sad, Emma said with the blunt observation of childhood. But you and Sarah look happy, so I think it balances out. Sarah laughed, then grew serious. Emma, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you okay with me being around, with me and your dad dating? Because if it ever feels like too much, or if you need space, you can tell us. We won't be mad. Emma thought about it, her face scrunched in concentration. Do you love my dad? Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. I do. And you're not going to leave. Sarah glanced at Mark, then back at Emma. I'm not going to leave, I promise. Then I'm okay with it. Emma returned to her puzzle. Plus, you're teaching me how to be a detective. That's really cool. After Emma went to bed, Sarah helped Mark clean up the remaining party debris. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people are truly at ease with each other. I got a call from my captain today, Sarah said, as they packed away the last of the decorations. They're moving forward with charging Richard Henderson's stepson with child endangerment. The DA thinks we have enough evidence now. Because of what happened with Emma, partly, but also because two more neighbors came forward after they heard about the incident. People who had been too afraid of Henderson's lawyers and influence. Sarah's smile was fierce. He made a mistake going after Emma. He thought it would scare me off, but instead it made other people brave enough to speak up. And Lily. We're bringing her in for a forensic interview tomorrow. With multiple witnesses now willing to testify to a pattern of behavior, we might finally have enough to get her out of that house. Mark pulled Sarah into his arms. I'm proud of you, for not giving up, for fighting for that little girl even when it got dangerous. I couldn't have done it without you supporting me. Sarah looked up at him. When Emma was taken, I was so terrified, not just for her, but that I'd lost you both, that you'd never forgive me for putting her in danger. You didn't put her in danger. A predator did. You saved her. Mark kissed her softly. And Emma's right, you're a hero. I'm just a cop doing her job. No, you're someone who turns pain into purpose, who takes the worst thing that ever happened to her and uses it as fuel to protect others. Mark rested his forehead against hers. That's not just doing a job. That's heroism. They stood there on his porch holding each other as the stars came out overhead. Somewhere in the house, Emma slept peacefully, surrounded by birthday presents and the knowledge that she was loved and protected. And for the first time in years, Mark Donovan felt like his family was exactly what it was supposed to be. Not perfect, not without complications or challenges, but real, honest, built on a foundation of truth and trust and the kind of love that grows stronger through adversity rather than breaking under its weight. He had stopped to help a stranger in a storm and found his future. Sarah had come home seeking redemption and found a family. Emma had gained not a replacement for her mother, but something unique and precious, a woman who chose to love her, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. And Rebecca perhaps was beginning to find her own path forward, freed from the burden of competing with ghosts. It wasn't the end of their story. There would be more challenges ahead, the trial with Henderson, the ongoing navigation of co-parenting with Rebecca, the normal ups and downs of any relationship. But they would face it together. And that Mark thought, as he and Sarah finally headed inside, made all the difference. The morning of Emma's 9th birthday had marked a turning point, but the real work of building a life together was just beginning. Mark discovered that loving Sarah was the easy part. It was navigating the complex reality of blending their lives that required patience and grace and more vulnerability than he'd anticipated. 2 weeks after the birthday party, Rebecca called, not to argue or manipulate, but with what sounded like genuine contrition in her voice. I've been thinking about what you said, about boundaries and Emma deserving better. She paused. I started seeing a therapist. She's helping me understand some things about myself and why I made the choices I made. Mark was sitting at his kitchen table, Emma at school, Sarah at work. Outside, rain fell in a gentle patter so different from that storm that had brought Sarah back into his life. That's good, Rebecca. Really good. I wanted to apologize, she continued, to you and to Emma. I put my insecurities and competitiveness ahead of what she needed. That wasn't fair to her, or to you. I appreciate you saying that. And Mark, Rebecca's voice wavered slightly. If you and Sarah get serious, like marriage serious, I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to make things difficult. Emma clearly loves her. And you deserve to be happy. After they hung up, Mark sat for a long moment processing. He'd expected Rebecca to remain a source of conflict indefinitely. This shift, this willingness to grow and change felt like a gift he hadn't known he needed. He texted Sarah. Rebecca called. I think we might actually be okay. Her response came quickly. Really, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. Then a moment later, I have news too. Can we talk tonight? That evening, after Emma was in bed reading, Sarah came over with a bottle of wine and an expression Mark couldn't quite read, nervous but also excited. They settled on the couch and Sarah took a deep breath. The forensic interview with Lily happened today. Mark squeezed her hand, and she disclosed everything, the abuse, the threats, the fear she's been living with. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She's out of that house, Mark. She's with a foster family who actually cares about her safety. And the DA is moving forward with criminal charges against her stepfather. Sarah, that's amazing. Mark pulled her close. You did that. You saved her. We did it. If you and Emma hadn't supported me, if you hadn't given me the strength to keep fighting, when Henderson tried to intimidate us, I don't know if I could have seen it through. Sarah wiped her eyes. I went to see her today. Lily. She's staying with a wonderful couple who already have 2 foster children. She was smiling, Mark. Actually smiling. How do you feel? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. Lighter. Like I've been carrying this weight for so long. Grief over my own loss, guilt over not being able to save my baby, and saving Lily doesn't erase any of that. But it helps. It feels like maybe the pain I went through wasn't meaningless. Like it gave me the empathy and drive to save another child. And they talked late into the night about the case, about Rebecca's call, about the small miracles of ordinary days. When Sarah finally left around midnight, Mark stood in his doorway watching her car pull away and realized with crystal clarity that he wanted to marry this woman. Not someday, not eventually, soon. But he had to do it right. He had to make sure Emma was ready, that Sarah was ready, that they were all moving forward as a family, rather than 2 adults making a decision that affected a child without her input. The next morning, Mark made pancakes in the shape of detective badges. Emma giggled with delight as she drowned them in syrup. Can I ask you something, sweetheart? Sure, Daddy. Mark sat down across from her, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since asking Sarah to coffee that first time. How would you feel if Sarah became a permanent part of our family, like if we all lived together? Emma's eyes went wide. You mean like if you married her? Eventually, yeah, but I wanted to know how you felt about it first. Emma set down her fork, her expression serious. Would she still be Sarah? Or would I have to call her mom? She'd still be Sarah. You have a mom? Rebecca is your mom. Sarah would be Sarah, your dad's wife, your friend, someone who loves you and helps take care of you. Would we still do stuff, just you and me? Absolutely. That would never change. Emma thought about it, syrup dripping forgotten from her fork. I like Sarah. She listens to me and teaches me cool stuff and makes you laugh more. She paused. And she makes really good cookies. Mark laughed. She does make good cookies. Then I think it would be nice if she stayed forever. Emma returned to her pancakes. But you should get her a really pretty ring. She deserves it. I'll keep that in mind. Finding the right ring proved harder than Mark anticipated. He wanted something meaningful, something that acknowledged their history while celebrating their future. After 3 failed shopping trips, he mentioned his dilemma to his mother. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small velvet box. This was your grandmother's engagement ring. She always said she wanted it to go to whoever truly captured your heart. His mother placed the box in his hands. I think Sarah qualifies. Mark opened it to reveal a vintage sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, the blue-green of the stone almost exactly the color of Sarah's eyes. Mom, are you sure? Your grandmother would have loved Sarah. She always said the best love stories were the ones with plot twists. His mother smiled. I think this qualifies. The question was where to propose. Mark considered various romantic options, a fancy restaurant, a beach at sunset, a mountaintop hike. But none of them felt quite right. Then he realized there was only one place that made sense. That stretch of highway where they'd found each other again in the rain. He called Sarah on a Saturday afternoon claiming there was something wrong with his truck and asking if she could meet him at a specific mile marker. The lie made him nervous. They'd promised honesty, but this seemed like a forgivable exception. Sarah pulled up behind his truck 20 minutes later, concern written across her face as she climbed out of her car. What's wrong? You couldn't get it started. Actually, the truck's fine. Mark stepped forward, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind that grew along this stretch of road. I just wanted to bring you back to where our story restarted. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face, followed by something that looked like panic and joy fighting for dominance. Mark, 10 years ago, I let you walk away because we were young and scared and thought we had all the time in the world to figure things out. Mark took her hand, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Life took us on different journeys, gave us different loves and losses, but somehow, impossibly, it brought us back to this exact place. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Mark dropped to one knee, pulling out his grandmother's ring. Sarah Collins, I don't want to waste any more time. Emma and I both love you. Will you marry me and make our family complete? For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, then found her eye. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Mark slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and then she was pulling him to his feet, kissing him as cars drove past, some honking in celebration of the obvious proposal happening on the roadside. I can't believe you brought me here, Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. This is perfect. This is... She stopped looking at the ring. Mark, this is gorgeous and old. Is this... My grandmother's. My mom wanted you to have it. Fresh tears spilled. I haven't even met your grandmother. She passed away 5 years ago, but Mom says she would have loved you, that she always said the best love stories had plot twists. Sarah laughed wetly. We certainly have those. They stood there holding each other, the same spot where months earlier, a simple act of kindness had reopened a door they'd thought closed forever. Around them, the world continued. Cars rushing past, wind rustling the grass, clouds rolling across an autumn sky. When do you want to tell Emma? Sarah asked. She already knows. Mark grinned at Sarah's shocked expression. I asked her permission first. She said yes, but insisted you deserve a really pretty ring. She's a smart girl. She gets it from her dad. Sarah swatted his arm playfully, then grew serious. I know this isn't going to be easy. Blending our lives, navigating co-parenting with Rebecca, all the regular challenges that come with marriage. But I want you to know I'm in this completely. I'm not running. Not ever again. I know. And Mark did know. He'd seen her face down her own trauma to save a child. He'd watched her fight for their relationship even when he'd been ready to push her away out of fear. This woman was a fighter, not a runner. They drove to his mother's house to share the news. She cried and hugged Sarah so tightly that Mark worried about his fiancé's ability to breathe. They picked up Emma from her playdate, and she squealed with delight at seeing the ring on Sarah's finger. Can I help plan the wedding? Emma asked immediately. And can I be the flower girl and the maid of honor? You can be whatever you want to be, Sarah assured her. This is your celebration too. That evening, Mark called Rebecca to tell her the news. He expected tension or bitterness, but Rebecca surprised him. Congratulations. Really, I mean that. She paused. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? Like really happy? Mark looked across the room where Sarah and Emma were looking at wedding magazines together, their heads bent close, Emma pointing at elaborate cakes while Sarah laughed. Yeah, Rebecca, I really am. Good. That's really good. Her voice was thick. Tell Emma I love her. And Mark, take care of them both. I will. After he hung up, Sarah looked up questioningly. Rebecca gave us her blessing, he said, still slightly stunned. People really can change, Sarah said softly, for the better. Planning the wedding proved to be both easier and harder than Mark anticipated. They wanted something small and meaningful, just close family and friends. They decided on his backyard, which his mother immediately began transforming into what she called a proper garden venue. Emma threw herself into preparations with the intensity she brought to everything. She designed invitations, practiced her flower girl walk, until Mark was certain she'd worn a path in the carpet and insisted on helping Sarah shop for a dress. It has to be princessy, but also cool, Emma declared, like you're a princess who can also solve crimes. Somehow, Sarah found a dress that fit that exact description, simple white silk with delicate beading that caught the light, elegant, but with a hint of edge. When she showed Emma, his daughter's eyes went wide. You look like a hero princess, Emma breathed. 3 months after the proposal, on a perfect spring day, when the cherry trees in Mark's backyard were in full bloom, they got married. Emma walked down the makeshift aisle first, scattering rose petals with solemn concentration. She wore a blue dress that matched the sapphires in Sarah's ring and looked so grown up that Mark's throat tightened. Then Sarah appeared, walking alone. Her parents had made the trip from Florida, but she'd insisted she didn't need anyone to give her away since she was choosing this freely. She looked breathtaking. The dress her hair swept up with small flowers woven through it, but mostly the expression on her face as she walked toward him, pure joy mixed with wonder, like she couldn't quite believe this was real. The ceremony was short and personal. Mark's uncle Jim officiated, having gotten ordained online for the occasion. They'd written their own vows. Sarah, Mark began, his voice steady despite his nerves. 10 years ago, losing you felt like the end of my world. But it was actually the beginning of the journey that brought us both to this moment. You taught me about second chances, about forgiveness, about the kind of love that grows stronger through adversity. I promise to support you, to trust you, to face every challenge together, and to never stop fighting for us. Wow, Sarah wiped tears from her eyes before speaking. Mark, I spent 10 years trying to run from the best decision I ever made, and life in its wisdom brought me back to you when I was finally ready to deserve you. I promise to stay even when things get hard, to be honest even when it's scary, to love both you and Emma with everything I have, and to build with you the life I once threw away. When Jim pronounced them married, Mark kissed his wife with a happiness that felt almost too big to contain. But the most meaningful moment came after the ceremony. Sarah, Mark, and Emma stood together at a small table where 3 different colored sands sat in clear containers, blue for Sarah, brown for Mark, and purple for Emma. Marriage isn't just about 2 people joining together, Sarah said, addressing the small gathering. It's about creating something new, a family built on choice and love. Together, the 3 of them poured their sands into a single glass vessel, the colors swirling and mixing until it was impossible to tell where one ended and another began. Emma beamed as she watched the colors blend. "We're a real family now," she declared. "We were always a real family," Sarah said gently. "This just makes it official." The reception was informal barbecue from Mark's favorite local place, dancing on the lawn, Emma teaching Sarah's nephew how to do the detective walk she'd perfected. Rebecca attended, sitting quietly near the back with her new boyfriend, a kind-looking man who seemed genuinely interested in her. At one point, Rebecca approached the newlyweds. "Congratulations," she said, the words sounding only slightly forced. "Emma looks really happy." "Thank you for coming," Sarah replied. "It means a lot to her and to us." Rebecca nodded, then added in a lower voice, "Take care of them, both of them." "I will," Sarah promised, "always." After Rebecca left, Emma tugged on Sarah's dress. "You look tired. Is being married hard?" Sarah laughed, scooping Emma up, despite the girl's protest that she was too old for that. "Being married is wonderful. I'm just tired because your dad made me dance to 5 songs in a row." "That's because you're a good dancer," Emma declared. "Better than Mom ever was." Later, after the last guest had left and Emma had finally crashed, still wearing her flower girl dress, Mark and Sarah stood in their backyard surveying the aftermath of the celebration. "We did it," Sarah said, leaning against him. "We did." Mark wrapped his arms around her waist. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Donovan?" "Actually, I'm keeping Collins professionally, but personally." She turned in his arms, her eyes catching the fairy lights his mother had strung through the trees. "It feels perfect." Their first year of marriage brought challenges neither of them had fully anticipated. Sarah's promotion to senior detective meant longer, more unpredictable hours. Mark's construction company landed a major contract for a new hospital complex, 2 counties over, requiring him to be on site multiple times a week. They juggled schedules, childcare arrangements, and household responsibilities with varying degrees of success. There were dinners burned because they'd both forgotten it was their turn to cook. There were mornings when Emma had to wake both adults because they'd overslept. There was laundry piled high and dishes in the sink, and the constant feeling of barely keeping their heads above water. Their first major fight as a married couple came 4 months in. Sarah had missed Emma's school concert, the one she'd been practicing for weeks, the one where she had a solo. Mark had been there recording it on his phone, beaming with pride. But when Sarah finally arrived home at 9 p.m. exhausted from a missing person case, Mark's frustration boiled over. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he said, the words sharp with disappointment. "Emma counting on someone who isn't there when it matters. Sarah recoiled as if he'd slapped her. That's not fair. I didn't choose to miss it. This was a 7-year-old boy who wandered away from his family at a park. Do you know what could have happened to him? Of course I know, but Emma is our responsibility, our priority. You can't save every child in this city. So what are you saying I should have told my partner who has 3 kids of his own to handle it alone? I should have left a terrified family with all available resources because my stepdaughter had a concert. She's not just your stepdaughter. She's your daughter now. That's what you signed up for when you married me. The words hung between them, harsh and jagged. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You're right, she said quietly. She is my daughter, and I failed her tonight. But Mark, I'm doing my best. I'm trying to balance a job that saves lives with being present for Emma, and some days I'm going to get it wrong. That doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean I'm not committed. Mark deflated the anger draining out of him as quickly as it had flared. I know. I'm sorry. I just seeing her face when she looked for you in the audience and you weren't there. Do you think that doesn't kill me? Sarah wiped her eyes. Do you think I don't feel guilty every single time I miss something? But I can't be in 2 places at once, and I can't turn off the part of me that needs to protect children, even if they're not mine. They went to bed angry that night, backs turned to each other, the silence heavy with hurt and unspoken fears. The next morning, Mark woke to find Sarah's side of the bed empty. He found her in the kitchen making pancakes with Emma, both still in pajamas, the radio playing softly. Good morning, Daddy, Emma chirped. Sarah's teaching me how to flip pancakes without making a mess. Sarah met his eyes over their daughter's head, a peace offering in her expression. Morning, Mark said, his voice rough from sleep and residual hurt. Smells good. After Emma went back to her room to get dressed, Sarah turned to him. I'm sorry about last night, about missing the concert, and about our fight. I'm sorry too, what I said about you not being there that was cruel and not true. You're there for Emma in 1,000 ways. But you were right that I need to find better balance. Sarah took a deep breath. I talked to my captain this morning. I'm switching to day shifts only. No more late nights unless it's absolutely critical. And I'm blocking off Emma's events in my calendar as non-negotiable. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Not because you're forcing me, but because you're right. Emma is my daughter now, and she needs to know she can count on me. Mark pulled her close. This is hard, isn't it, the balancing act? Yeah, but we'll figure it out, together. She pulled back to look at him. I need you to tell me when you're struggling, though. Don't let it build up until you explode. We promised honesty, remember? You're right, I will. They emerged from that fight stronger with new ground rules and a deeper understanding of each other's needs and limitations. Sarah made it to the next school event, a science fair, where Emma's volcano predictably exploded with excessive enthusiasm. Mark started handling more of the morning routine so Sarah could go to the gym before work, giving her back some of the self-care time she'd lost. They established sacred times, Sunday morning breakfast, Wednesday movie nights, and Emma's bedtime routine where all 3 of them would squeeze onto Emma's bed for story time. No matter how busy or stressed they got, these times remained untouchable. And slowly, incrementally, they found their rhythm. A year and a half into their marriage, during one of their sacred Sunday breakfasts, Sarah set down her coffee cup with a slight tremor in her hand. I need to tell you both something. Emma looked up from her waffles, sensing the seriousness in Sarah's tone. Mark reached for his wife's hand. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, at least I don't think so. Sarah took a shaky breath. I'm pregnant. The world seemed to stop. Mark stared at his wife, processing the words that he'd never thought he'd hear from her. But I thought the doctors said, they said it was unlikely after the complications from my miscarriage. Not impossible, just unlikely. Sarah's eyes were wet. I'm 8 weeks along. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure, until we'd made it past the point where I lost. She couldn't finish the sentence. Emma's squeal of delight broke the stunned silence. I'm going to have a baby brother or sister. Maybe, Sarah said carefully, if everything goes okay. It's still early, Mark found his voice. How do you feel, I mean physically? Emotionally, are you okay? Terrified, Sarah admitted, but also happy, hopeful. Is that crazy? No. Mark stood and pulled her into his arms, careful as if she might break. It's not crazy at all. The pregnancy was monitored closely given Sarah's history. Every appointment brought anxiety, followed by relief when they heard the heartbeat, saw the baby moving on the ultrasound. Sarah read every pregnancy book available, ate perfectly balanced meals, and stressed over every twinge and pain. Mark tried to be supportive while managing his own fears. What if they lost this baby too? What if the stress of it broke Sarah? But as the weeks turned into months and Sarah's belly grew, hope began to tentatively take root. Emma was thrilled about becoming a big sister. She talked to Sarah's belly, made drawings for the baby's room, and presented a 5-page list of name suggestions, half of which were from her favorite fantasy novels. Rebecca's reaction to the news surprised everyone. She sent a thoughtful card congratulating them and offering to help with Emma if they needed it during the newborn phase. "That's really nice of her," Sarah said, touched by the gesture. "She's trying," Mark replied. "We all are." At Sarah's 6th-month checkup, the doctor's face grew serious while reviewing the ultrasound. Mark's heart plummeted. "What's wrong?" "Your blood pressure is elevated. Combined with some protein in your urine, I'm concerned about preeclampsia." The doctor looked at Sarah firmly. "I'm putting you on bed rest, effective immediately." Sarah argued she had cases to close, responsibilities at work, but the doctor was unmoved. "You want this baby to survive, then you stay off your feet except for bathroom breaks and doctor's appointments. No work, no stress, just rest." The next 2 months were agonizing for Sarah, who was used to being constantly in motion. Mark rearranged his work schedule to be home more, hiring an assistant foreman to handle daily site operations. Emma stepped up in ways that made both adults marvel, bringing Sarah books, keeping her company after school, and generally being helpful in a way that seemed to age her overnight. And then in a twist none of them saw coming, Rebecca showed up. "I know we're not friends," she said to Sarah, "and I know I've been difficult, but Emma's worried about you, and I remember being pregnant and scared. So if you need help, someone to bring you lunch, keep you company, help with errands, I'm offering." Sarah, confined to bed and bored out of her mind, accepted. What started as awkward visits evolved into something resembling friendship. Rebecca would bring lunch, and they'd watch terrible reality TV together. They talked about pregnancy fears, about being mothers, about the complexity of their shared history. "I was so jealous of you," Rebecca admitted one afternoon. "You had this ability to make Mark light up. Even when you weren't there, he had this piece of himself reserved for the memory of you. I spent 5 years trying to access that part of him." "I'm sorry," Sarah said quietly, "for the pain my leaving caused, for the ripple effects that touched you. Don't apologize. You leaving was the best thing that could have happened to me in some ways. It forced me to confront why I was marrying him, which was all the wrong reasons. I'm in therapy now, learning to build my self-worth on something other than competition and validation from men." "That's really healthy," Rebecca laughed. "Yeah, well, it only took 2 failed relationships and hurting my daughter to get here. But better late than never, right?" When Emma came home from school to find her mother and stepmother laughing together over a reality show about bakers, she stood in the doorway looking confused. "Are you guys friends now?" "Something like that," Sarah said. "We're complicated," Rebecca added, "but we're trying." At Sarah's 37th week, her blood pressure spiked dangerously. The doctor made the call to induce labor. "It's early, but not too early," he assured them. "The baby's lungs are developed. We just need to get you both through delivery safely." Mark held Sarah's hand through 18 hours of labor, whispering encouragement, wiping sweat from her forehead, being her anchor through the pain and fear. Emma waited with Mark's mother, too nervous to stay, but too worried to go far. And Rebecca sat in the waiting room, having shown up unannounced with coffee and snacks, claiming, "Emma needs people she loves around her right now." When their son James Michael Donovan finally arrived, small but healthy, with a surprisingly loud cry, Sarah sobbed with relief and joy. "He's here," she kept saying. "He's really here. He's okay." Mark held his son, this tiny person who already had Sarah's nose and what might become her green eyes, and felt his world expand in ways he hadn't thought possible. Emma met her baby brother with awe and immediate devotion. "He's so small," she whispered, "but his hands are just like Dad's." Even Rebecca, who'd only been going to peek in and leave, stayed to meet baby James, her eyes suspiciously wet as she congratulated the new parents. The first few months with a newborn were exhausting in ways that made the regular chaos of their lives look easy by comparison. Sarah struggled with postpartum anxiety, constantly checking that James was breathing, convinced that somehow she'd lose this baby too. Mark juggled work, Emma's needs, and supporting Sarah through the storm of hormones and fear. They hired a postpartum doula who helped normalize Sarah's feelings and taught them both survival techniques for new parenthood. Emma adjusted to sharing attention with varying degrees of grace. Some days she was the perfect, helpful big sister. Other days she acted out angry about the baby crying or Sarah being too tired to do things with her. "I hate it when James cries," she yelled one evening after a particularly rough day. "Why can't you make him stop?" Mark found her in her room later, tears streaming down her face. "I'm a bad sister," she sobbed. "I shouldn't have yelled." "You're not a bad sister. You're a tired girl who's dealing with a lot of changes." Mark pulled her close. "It's okay to have big feelings. It's okay to be frustrated sometimes. But I love him. I do. I just also miss when it was quieter and Sarah had time for me and you didn't always look so tired." "I know, sweetheart. And we're going to get better at balancing everything. But in the meantime, your feelings are valid. All of them." Slowly, painfully, they found their footing as a family of four. Sarah returned to work part-time at 6 months, easing back into detective work, while learning to trust that leaving James without a nanny didn't make her a bad mother. Mark's business continued to grow, allowing him to hire more people and take on a more supervisory role with more flexible hours. Emma joined the school's detective club, an idea Sarah had suggested to the principal, and threw herself into solving mock mysteries with the enthusiasm she brought to everything. And Rebecca, perhaps most surprisingly, became a consistent presence. She'd take Emma every other weekend, giving Mark and Sarah time to focus on James or each other, or just to sleep. She'd stop by occasionally to help with errands or babysit so Mark and Sarah could have date nights. "Who are you and what have you done with Rebecca?" Mark asked her one day, genuinely curious. She laughed. "Therapy is a hell of a drug, plus Emma's happier when I'm not creating drama. Turns out I actually love my kid more than I love being petty." Who knew? 2 years after James was born, on a lazy Sunday morning during their sacred breakfast time, Emma made an announcement. "I've been thinking," she said seriously, "and I want to officially change my last name to Donovan Collins." Sarah's fork clattered to her plate. "Emma, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." Emma looked between her parents. "Mark is my dad and Rebecca is my mom. But Sarah, you're also my parent. You're the one who helps with homework and comes to my detective club meetings and taught me how to stand up for myself. And Collins is your name. So I want it to be mine too." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure? What about your mom?" "I asked her already. She said it was up to me and that she understood." Emma shrugged. "She said family is about who shows up, not just about whose last name you have." Mark reached across the table to grip Sarah's hand as she cried, happy, overwhelmed tears. "Emma Donovan Collins," she said, testing it out. "I love it." "Me too," Emma agreed. "Plus now my initials spell EDC, which sounds like a detective agency." That night, after the kids were in bed, James in his crib, Emma in her room with her detective novels, Mark and Sarah sat on their porch swing. The same swing where they'd first opened up to each other about their broken pieces and tentative hopes. "5 years," Sarah said quietly. "5 years since you stopped in that storm. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Sarah corrected, smiling. "The best was saying yes when I called and asked you to coffee." Mark laughed. "Fair point." They swung gently, the chains creaking in familiar rhythm, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Inside, their children slept. In town, Rebecca was probably watching one of her reality shows, maybe texting her boyfriend. Somewhere in the county, Lily Henderson was growing up safe with her adoptive family, the stepfather who'd hurt her in prison. Life had taken them on such strange winding paths, through heartbreak and loss, through mistakes and pain, and the kind of darkness that makes you question if light exists at all. But here on the other side of all that grief, they'd built something beautiful. Not perfect, never perfect. There would be more fights and challenges ahead. James was still waking 3 times a night. Emma was approaching the teenage years with all the complexity that would bring. Sarah's work would always carry elements of danger and stress. Mark's business would have ups and downs, Rebecca would have good days and hard days. Life would keep happening in all its messy, complicated glory, but they would face it together. A family not built on perfection or the absence of pain, but on the radical choice to keep showing up, to forgive and grow in love even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if your truck had just driven past me that day? Sarah asked, echoing a question she'd posed years ago. Mark kissed the top of her head. I couldn't have driven past. It's not who I am. That's why I love you, she said simply, because you're the kind of man who stops to help even in a storm. As the fireflies began their nightly dance across the yard and the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, Mark reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them here. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone new. They're about rediscovering someone who was meant to be yours all along. Sometimes the detours in life lead us exactly where we were always meant to go. And sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are waiting just on the other side of a storm. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories about love redemption and second chances. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to heal, to forgive, or to find your way back to where you belong. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are waiting just on the other side of a storm. Sometimes the person who broke your heart is the same person meant to help you heal it. And sometimes the detours in life lead us exactly where we were always meant to go. What would you have done in Mark's position? Would you have stopped to help? Would you have given Sarah a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Thank you for watching, and until next time, remember that kindness, even something as simple as stopping to help a stranger, can change not only their life, but yours as well.